radio, dum-dum radio. Oh, we're not
Richard, Radio Richard. Yeah.
So, hi, yes, it's Richard Niles on Radio Richard, and I'm lucky enough to have Dave Marks with me today. Now, Dave is an old friend. We played together in lots of different situations. He's been very, very brave to play some notes that I put on pieces of paper. Dave has played in so many different situations, and now he's touring with Hans Zimmer and his amazing, huge, humongous orchestra. So I thought it would be a good chance to talk to you about this subject here. Look at that. Yes, this is my book called How to Become an Employable Musician. Now, I think that's one of the things that all musicians hope that they can be. But there are a lot of nice little techniques that you can develop to make yourself more employable. So, Dave, you are so employable.
Yes.
And so employed.
Yeah?
Yes, that too. So, one of the first things that people always ask is, how good do you have to be? I mean, what kind of technique level do you really need to do a gig like you're doing now, or any of the great gigs that you've done?
It's weird because each of the different artists or particular jobs you'd have a specific set of requirements.
Yes.
And funny, this was something I was chatting with a friend of mine at NAM about. There are people out there who are very narrowly specialised to a very high degree.
Right.
So I can play this style, or I can play this particular technique, and I do it almost better than anybody in the world.
Right.
But I can't do anything else.
All right.
I call that the Sean Connery. So
Yes.
no matter what role he was playing, he was always Scottish.
Yes.
He always sounded Scottish. He was the King of England in one. He was the Spaniard in Highlander, still Scottish.
Right.
And you can be that musician who people hire you to get that sound.
Yes.
Because it's so specialised.
Yes.
I think nowadays that's less common than it used to be, and for most people it's a matter of having a broad range of skill sets,
Right.
which could be that you're particularly technically able, but it also could be maybe that you have very good memory for learning things
Right.
quickly.
Right.
It could be that you have a great ear for responding to things
Right.
in a moment. So I think in terms of just the sheer chopsy side of technique, particularly for bass players, you don't need loads of chops, but what you need is, people underestimate how technically difficult it is to be consistent, how to play with great dynamics, how to be
Right.
really even and have great feeling. If you listen to the way someone like James Taylor or Paul Simon plays acoustic guitar,
Right.
it's not impressive. But if you actually try to replicate
Oh, yeah,
it, it's
it's
surprisingly difficult.
Yes, and impressive to me, because that's the great thing. They have such high musicality.
Yeah.
And I think also that's what you bring to whatever you do. You understand music not just from a superficial area, you understand it from the compositional area. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you know what you're supposed to be saying. And as has been said many times, a lot of musicians have a high degree of technique, but they're not actually emoting.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good thing. So let me ask you this question. In terms of general ability, would you say that reading is quite important for getting these gigs, for being a successful touring musician or studio musician, or what?
Okay, so certain gigs, again, the reading requirement is essential. So if
Right.
I'm going to go in and play with an orchestra, nobody has the time to wait for me to figure out what the song
Certainly,
is.
yes.
And it's a strange thing where you can put yourself into situations where you want to listen and interpret what's happening. The problem being there are often multiple notes that I could play,
Yeah.
which would all sound good,
Right,
but only one of them sounds correct with the composer's intention.
right,
So you could have a piece of music that has a looped 4-chord progression,
right,
and the whole way around they want the first half of the piece to be a pedal tone.
right.
Play G the whole way through, and only
Right.
at that halfway point I then follow the chords.
Sure.
And then beyond that I have another bit later on where it suddenly goes into a rising line with inversions or whatever it is. There's no way for me to know that in the room when I play with the other people. If I'm
Yeah.
listening to the orchestra or in a band.
Unless you're reading it and,
But if
and
you-
you're
yeah,
being told.
If it's written in a chart, then it's dictating to me, okay, in bar 4,
Yeah.
there's something I don't know about that's going to happen in bar 40 that dictates why I should play this now.
That's right.
Stay on the pedal
exactly.
tone.
Exactly.
So the ability to read stuff, if you think about it, when we play music, music occurs in time,
Yes.
and as we play it disappears behind us.
Right.
But on the page, you've frozen the music in time here that I can look at the start and the end of it at the same time
Exactly.
and see what happens. So
Exactly.
the reading gives you an insight into the evolution of the piece of music. And again, this was a thing when we worked together. I would take the stuff home, and Chris Dagley had kind of taught me the skill of recording yourself on the show, and I would come home, listen to it on a mini disc player, but reread the charts and do a kind of, I don't know what to call it, it's like maybe a passive read. So I wasn't trying to play, I was trying to understand the chart and the evolution of the song and the sections, and not just what they were but why they worked, while I listened back to what we played. And then also would figure out with that, okay, in that section that never sits right, what am I playing there that shouldn't be there, or vice versa. So I would say the skill of reading it's not essential in everything, but in certain things it is vital. And if you can't do it, you better have like the fastest and best ear. Pino Palladino is a good example of it. Didn't write charts, never did that thing. When guys would go into the studio, I worked with quite a few producers. Pino would come in and do work with them as well. And they said, you'd get Ian Thomas would sit and scribble a chart, or John Carshall, they'd sit and chart it. Pino just listen. And it's his brain can obviously like create a chart in his head, some sort of photographic image of how the time of the song, this verse, this chorus, this thing, and then he played and the magic came out. But for the rest of us mortals, you need anything you can that makes you, that you get to the correct answer more quickly.
Exactly. And the other thing that seems to me is a universal thing is style. So understanding style. Now, I love musicians who believe, as I do, that there isn't good or bad music. There's just well done music in any style. But to understand the style, like you have a lot of expertise in certain things, but you can also do those other things because you understand. So how much would you say an understanding of all styles is really important to be desirable as a touring musician?
I mean, the thing is, there are certain styles that I'm unlikely to be asked to play often. So there are particular niches, let's say, of South American music. So within a particular sort of tango or a particular, and for those things, if they're so highly specialized, you're just going to call those guys. But in general, if somebody wants to hear, if somebody wants to hear a great bossa nova, a great partito alto, samba thing, I have to know what those things are. Because if I try and fudge it and it's close but not correct, it's not going to fit with what everybody else is doing.
And also having the right instrument for the gig. Now, for instance, you're doing the Hans Zimmer gig. That must require a lot of different sounds. So tell me what your setup is for that show.
So for that one, I've got a 5-string electric bass, a Sandberg bass. I have a 4-string Steinberger electric upright, but it's tuned in drop D all the time. So I had to just put that in D and live with that, which is bowed, unplugged, and also tapped. And then I have a ukulele bass, which is just it's sonically... Is
that like the U bass?
It's the U bass,
the U bass,
exactly.
Nice.
So
I love that.
So it's brilliant fun. It's for one of the pieces where we go down to the front of the stage and they wanted everyone to be playing something a bit quirky. So the guitarist is on banjo, keyboard player's on accordion, and they said to me, what do you have? And I said, well, I can bring this. It looks quite funny, but it sounds massive. And when you're playing in an arena and you've got this monstrous noise coming while I'm playing this tiny little dinky thing,
killing.
It was great fun.
But
it's the combination of those three things. Paddleboard, I have a thing called a Quad Cortex, which is an amp modeler with loads of effects built into it, and I usually have maybe 4 or 5 pedals on the board with that that are rooted in the effects loops. And then for me, a lot of what comes from that is the combination of deciding which of those 3 instruments is the correct thing for the section, and sometimes I'll change in the middle of a song. I'll immediately jump from this to this. I'll have patches built that move through the song, so maybe the intro to one thing is one particular sound, but I'll jump to the next one for the next. And then simple decisions like which pickup you're on or the tone controls on the instrument. I see a lot of people when they play, they just kind of turn everything up and go, and there's such a breadth of kind of timbre you can get on the instrument. Where you play it, which techniques you use, plectrum or fingers or this, the pickups, the pedals, all these sorts of things. So for me, it's a big long chain of decision making and I've got expression pedals built
Right.
in, so I can use effects and blend things in and out.
Yes.
So for me, that gear aspect of it is, it's kind of like I want to be able to mix, again, it's producer idea, I want to mix myself from on stage.
Yes.
So the guy up front just has to like turn me up and down a little bit if he wants.
Yes.
But all of that sonic color and character
Yes.
will come from the things I play and the decisions I make when I'm playing.
Right.
Radio, dum dum radio. Always on Rich.